I can't tell you how many times I've been asked, hey, why is YouTube putting in that blurb of Wikipedia under your video? That blurb makes it really obvious that what you're saying is important, if not true, right? It's actually working against them. I think it's counterproductive. And for that reason, I would actually suggest also that it's going to go away completely. We're in an awkward in-between stage where we haven't yet been outright censored, but there's clearly already some algorithm detecting what we're talking about and slapping a warning on there. Viewers, don't listen to these people pulling that in from Wikipedia.
Adapt 2030 Mini Ice Age Conversations covers changes in our climate due to a new and intensifying grand solar minimum, and the media overlooking, downplaying, or burying cold weather changes occurring on our planet. This is in order to keep the global warming agenda steaming full speed ahead. I do this podcast and radio program because we need to begin conversations on how to adapt our food growing strategies long before 2030 as agricultural zones shift, affecting global crop output, but very few mainstream media outlets are talking about the most important issue of our time: cold weather crop losses. Our sun is going through a 400-year cycle, which has effects on our weather patterns as our magnetosphere weakens and the jet streams go out of flow. It's not CO2, it's not you, it's the sun. Are you ready to thrive in the grand solar minimum? Then join me for Mini Ice Age Conversations. I'm your host, David Dubine. And I do welcome you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are on this planet. As asked for, today I have with me Christian Westbrook, the Ice Age Farmer. We're going to discuss crop losses, distraction in the media, censorship in the media, and a blueprint moving forward with what you can expect with your food prices, how this is going to tear apart the consumer spending economy. You can find more information at iceagefarmer.com. Also, he has the Ice Age Farmer wiki page where he maintains a real-time crop loss map. Yeah, for me, that is a certificate of authenticity when I see one of those below my video, because, you know, it's science. And just boil it down. Forget all the social media. Forget all the news. Forget everything. It's science. It's supposed to be debated. Everything we've ever learned in science so far has been proven false. The world was flat. Everything that we've known in every scientific discovery, the quantum universe, the electric universe, everything we've ever known up to this day, in the future with better tech, better instrumentation, better experiments, we will prove false the reality that we know now. Because if you take a look at what was considered the absolute truth in science in the 1600s compared to today, you would laugh at them and go, what a bunch of, are you kidding? You got to be kidding me. And then if we do the same thing in the 1800s, we could do the exact same experiment. You would come out with, oh my gosh, I can't even believe they thought that. And every single century is the same as we just progress through history. So imagine 400, 500 years from now, what are they going to think about our current time? They're going to think the exact same thing, like, oh, I can't even believe they would think that. That's ridiculous. So everything you know about science needs to continually be questioned. And because we have a different foundation for these changes, hey, they should be right at the forefront of questioning, because they seem to have a lot more validity than just CO2. And now, because I have another article here too I wanted to bring up for you. Since they're not having, CO2 does not have the scare effect any longer. This one's coming off the Danish media, where researchers at Svalbard have identified 4 new super greenhouse gases that are thousands of times more potent than CO2. So now they're even trying to push the narrative that this is discovered on Zeppel Station, troubling gas discoveries, potentially thousands of times higher power than CO2. Oh, it's 5 new gases, extremely harsh greenhouse gases. What? They just discovered them now? See, this is what I'm talking about, the change in science. They've been talking about greenhouse gases for how many decades, and now they suddenly found 5 new ones just this month. You see, that's a change in science, so we should be debating, talking continually, questioning the narrative of what science is, but they don't want to do that. It's already decided, blah, blah, blah.
And this episode's brought to you by TrueLeafMarket.com. Heirloom and organic seeds since 1974. Full range of garden seeds, microgreen seeds, sprouting seeds, wheatgrass, grain seeds, flower seeds, herb seeds, and ground cover crop. I encourage you to take a look at their website, TrueLeafMarket.com, and they even have free starter guides there for you to learn how to grow sprouts, microgreens, herbs, and wheatgrass. Use the link below and give yourself the gift of organic and heirloom seeds.
I wanted to start with climate change on Mars. We've been told that Mars is a dead planet, that it has no tectonic activity, and those volcanoes have been dead for 1 million years, plus, plus, plus. This is an electric universe, direct electromagnetic connection effect, but they still won't talk about this because it doesn't fit we're just in a ball in space, spinning around with our magnetic fields, just going off in another netherland. Wait a second, it connects back to the sun. Of course, the Mars magnetic field connect back to the sun. And everything we knew about Mars, too. Remember back in the 70s, there was no atmosphere, there was no water, there was no life. Now they're finding thin atmosphere, there's water, there's frozen water under the surface, a full ocean, by the way. There's ice on the poles, and everything you knew about Mars, just think about that, has been proven incorrect in just the last 40 years. So talking about science, we should be debating the causes of this climate change and talking about them daily and really trying to put it out there and solutions, because we know what happened in past cycles. And they just don't want to touch it. They'd rather just shut down the argument so they don't have to deal with it, because 40 years of their indoctrination, you're going to be asking a lot of questions, and you're going to want a lot of people fired, and you're going to want a lot of funding cut when you realize that it's all just smoke and mirrors.
What's really amazing about those quote-unquote 5 new greenhouse gases, they pulled the same move when Al-Qaeda had lost some of its fear factor, and they had to introduce ISIS. So that's just amazing to hear that sort of a play in the science realm as well. I also wanted to point out that I do come from Silicon Valley, so I wanted to share a little bit of insight. It has become increasingly hard. They've created these internet ghettos, like Matt Drudge calls them, the Facebook, the Twitter. But it's also, over the course of the last decade or so, been more and more difficult, been made more and more complex to create your own services. And so it's not as easy as just starting up a new Twitter. Like Gab.ai did that, and it was with the intention of free speech, and they're still running it. It's a great service. We're both on there. But they were actually threatened, I don't know if you saw this, by Microsoft. We're going to kick you off of our cloud if you don't start censoring. They had a few examples of things they wanted censored. So you can try and get off of these platforms and build your own, but even then they own the very infrastructure of the internet. And you're right that, like, we saw the blackouts in Egypt when there was some social activity there, and they were using social media to coordinate flash mobs and stuff like that. So they pulled the plug on that, and they absolutely will do that wherever they see the need. We can work around that to some extent, unless they completely cut the cord. We can work around that with blockchain applications, and even mesh networks would work in some local situations, generally distributed systems, that kind of stuff. But those things take time to set up, and the bulk of the population won't just know to hop to them. So it really speaks a lot to offline activism, and I'll talk about that, I think.
Yeah, but back to the leeches. A lot of people do use leeches for bloodletting today, so you got to think in a pioneering lifestyle. And you just go, oh, that's actually a really good idea, using ancient medicine to bloodlet. And, what do you know about your natural environment around you? What are medicinal plants that are growing natural wild in your neighborhood? If the just-in-time delivery breaks down, could you use marigolds and boil up your own antibiotic tinctures? Yes or no? Would you even know that marigolds can make an antibiotic tincture? Using leeches, that's been used for thousands of years to remove sepsis, different types of bacteria and disease, letting fish also eat inside your wounds. But, going back to these more ancient healing practices and really knowing what's around your local area, that could be food or medicine. You really need to start considering these things, because just-in-time delivery revolves around credit, and as credit continues to decrease, and we're starting to see the warning signs everywhere. If you read on Zero Hedge, I mean, every other article is talking about a downturn, a contraction, full on funds selling out, drawdowns on this, people selling these bonds, and you just see it looks like rats escaping a sinking ship. And they talk about 2008 and 9 will consider like an ultra light event compared to what's coming. So when you start to mesh all these together, and if you understood as a world leader, a body of world leaders that, hey man, you don't have to pay it back anyway because the society reset button that's coming, just run the economic system into the ground as long as you can to prepare as long as you can, because it's all going to disintegrate in the end anyway. Now, saying that sounds really doom and gloomy and scary, but it's a reset button. And if you figure out a way to buy, sell, trade, and you alluded to blockchain, trading, bartering, understanding your local environment, what your skills are, this is a way forward too. But back to the leeches, yeah, I really, because when you said I was getting leeches, I go, oh, I know a couple people who do that occasionally. So for me, I was like, oh, okay, cool. I'll see you in a minute.
Well, that's a good perspective to add into there. Yeah, trying to sort of sum up all that, I think alternative media is still missing the ball of a lot of that, of the imminent collapse of modern agriculture, and sadly, there's a lot of disinfo in there as well about crazy cosmic theories and Planet X things, and I think that's trying to crowd out the truth, at least until they just completely censor off the climate truth. But why? I think we need to ask ourselves, why? What's the deal here? Why are they so sold on global warming that it isn't, even when it's not proving out, right? It's failed prediction after failed prediction. It's actually pretty sad at this point, because it's been multiple decades where they just keep pushing these dates back and acting like alarmists, which is how I would, by the way, fight back against the weaponization of language, is to call them alarmists and refuse to become a denier, or realist is what we are over here. But it doesn't make sense what's going on unless you put that whole global warming agenda into the context of the larger depopulation agenda that's at play here. And it's not one that is fun to talk about or to listen to. And there may be some folks, I'm sure there are plenty of folks in your audience who are very familiar with it, and that's fantastic. But there are also some folks for whom it's going to sound outlandish and ridiculous. And I just have to submit that just as we had to approach the climate situation with an open mind and be willing to embrace whatever truth we found there, so too should we take that approach with everything else. Because the reality is that this ruling cryptocracy does have its origins in the Luciferian, Fabian socialism sort of agenda of a global, totalitarian, technocratic, genderless, transhumanist, foodless. I mean, it's a weird vision that they have put out there in their writings for hundreds of years now. It's been evolving, and they're open writings, so you can go find these things, and you should become familiar with them, because it's not unless you go through these awkward conversations and painful learnings that you can actually fully appreciate why this global warming agenda is going on, why they're laughing in our face while the temperatures are actually declining. There's a book called Wolves in Sheep's Clothing that is all about how the Fabian Society is linked to these modern environmental movements and UN Agenda 21 and UN Agenda 2030. And there's plenty of other researchers who write on that as well. But the Fabians are named from General Fabius Maximus, who was known for waiting patiently before. He was a very old guy for a general, but he waited very patiently while the enemy lost strength before finally striking. And they have named their society after this guy, and that's their motto: is we're going to wait until the last moment and then strike with a vengeance. And that wolves in sheep clothing is actually their coat of arms. And what we're witnessing now is that these wolves are finally striking. We're witnessing that strike. Their plan has finally come to fruition. And they openly wrote about this. I've covered this a lot on my channel, that the Club of Rome has writings where they said, look, we need to control people. We need to control their beliefs and their behaviors. And in order to do that, we need to be at war with someone, but we need the perfect enemy that will never go away. And it turns out the perfect enemy is humanity. It is the invention of global warming and of food scarcity and extreme weather events. And we'll concoct this enemy and will point at it and be very afraid, and will use that to take control. I mean, it's the ultimate false flag writ large across the entire globe, right?
And then you need to take it a step further, and you need to ask, what is the ultimate end reason for all of these steps and preparing and maneuvering through the centuries that we've seen? You know, these people go to war and they die, you know, routinely for causes. And then just using the United States, I mean, what was World War II for? And then what we look at what society we have today, it's been an invasion of what I consider Mao's playbook. You know, for those of you out there, I also used to work in China as a factory acquisition agent when I went to a year of university in China to study the language, familiarize myself with a little of the business culture, because I saw a lot of things moving out to Asia, and I was really enthralled with traveling and being able to live there, work there, and, you know, just so they have some of the most ancient history on our planet. So I was, you know, went out to Xi'an. They have the pyramids out there, and I was really interested in the Silk Road era and what did they really know, and why were they so deeply into the stars. And this is before I even started my channel, that I was really delving into ancient history. The Chinese also work on a 100-year plan. They don't work on a 4-year plan. They are also strategists through the centuries for their ultimate goal of continuing in the empire, growing society when they needed it to build out infrastructure, build out systems, canals, whatever it would have been, farmlands for the emperor, and then allow it to collapse down and then reset and then start over again with a new belief system after they wiped out the prior belief system. And it's just been like that successively for thousands of years. I mean, the humans are nothing more than just capital to be used to build out a system that then they build off themselves to keep their power structure intact. This is just an example from China as it moves forward. But this Mao playbook, since I lived there, and the Cultural Revolution is really what you want to delve into. Mm-hmm. Mao's playbook is fully in play in the United States at the moment. How they're using the students as ground shock troops, how they use the professors to indoctrinate for 4 to 8 years the rising high school students into the universities, and then their first couple of years out of uni, they became then the ones who were writing in the newspapers, dictating new social norms and thought policies, and this is how it moved forward. And then one day they pounced, and then the leaders from above gave the go-ahead. Oh, it's not on our finger. Oh, the students are uncontrollable. We can't control them. But they were the ones who let them loose in the first place. Now, with that being said, what is the end goal of what you're talking about with the Fabian Society? The end goal of the Chinese 100-year plans are world domination and control of their citizens to keep their power structure. And the new Emperor Xi that has forming himself, I mean, as Xi Jinping is completely the new emperor of our day. No competition. Number one, what he says goes. If you even blink an eye, no, you're gone. So what is the end goal? World population reduction without any culpability where, hey, we didn't kill anybody. The weather did it, and not letting us prepare. Because I've been to the Georgia Guidestones myself. I went out there. My parents and I were going down to Atlanta, so we drove. It's like 2 hours off of 75. You got to go east out into the middle of absolutely nowhere, out into the chicken farming areas. And you talk about economic devastation when you're driving out to the Georgia Guidestones through that really rural Georgia area. It's just out of business what was massive chicken farm after out of business chicken farm after out of business. Whoever was down there, Tyson, was getting all these farmers to, grow for them or raise chickens for them. But then one day they just swooped in and said, nah, we're going to do it ourselves. We don't need any more Georgia growers. But when you continue to this spot, it's on an energy portal itself. It's on a ley line, if you will. And, sitting there reading these things, and it's on a negative energy ley line. It's pretty spooky out there, even though it's in the middle of a field by itself, in the middle of nowhere. And, that had to have been chosen of an energy spot on our planet, because I do believe that these Fabians or whatever, a lot of people in power, they really are using these ritualistic energies, and they know about ley lines and these different types of ethereals and esoteric types of knowledge that they don't generally let the average person get into. And if you do get into it, they're like, oh, it's bad, it's this, that, don't look into it. So their end goal, yeah, I understand population reduction, but I also think at the same time it might be the frequency of your thought to be able to get you to vibrate at a certain frequency. And this is where it gets into what Tesla's talking about. The whole universe and nature of the universe is vibration and frequency. Now, what if you can use the human brain as a frequency weapon? This is where I think we're heading off into it. And Christian, I'll let you go there.
Well, yeah, that was a mouthful there, David. So you started off in China. I do think that's the central location of like the communists, the collectivists all seem to be converging there right now and bringing that forward. And yeah, I would also say look at another one. You can look at the dirty war in Argentina and sort of see how that played out. But those are more like the street level, Marxists just trying to burn it all down now. Whereas, as you suggest, the Fabians have a grander vision, one where it is the final revolution. In fact, as always, I guess the road to hell is paved with good intentions, and at least the ones they state in the first few hints at this are like, war is not really that good. This is probably a cover story too, but their first books are like, war is not that good. We're tired of it. The only way to make sure that there's never a war again is to take over the entire planet and kill everyone. And so that's literally where they've come from. And like I said, they've mixed that now into some really weird things, like the fact that humanity must become genderless and a transhumanist sort of thing. They must erase everything natural about our planet and separate us from the food production. Food production and what we eat is actually a big part of this. It's another thing we see throughout these globalists' writings. We've talked, both you and I have talked about the fake meat and the agenda behind that, the cockroach milk and the shifting image parameters of food. But I think there's actually more to it than just trying to get people off of the food that they're used to now. I think if you look at 1984 and Brave New World, both of those dystopic novels, and there's plenty of this in the globalist writings, have synthetic food featured there. And the reason is, like I said, they're changing. They must fundamentally reformat humanity, and food is an important part of who we are. It's a part of our culture. It's a part of who we are as humans. So this entire agenda ultimately is not just to starve many of us out, which I think the grand solar minimum will do for them. I think they know what's coming, and they have grafted this and formed their plans around it. So yes, food scarcity is in the cards. It's in their plan. But also to shift that diet onto these weird things like cockroach milk and the fake Soylent powder food and so on.
And that food that you put into your body, I don't know if you notice changes in the way your body feels with different foods that you put in it. If you're eating a steady diet of the same, you probably won't know or remember when you switched your foods to something if it had a different effect. So, I live out in Asia still, and I just went back to the States for almost a month. And when I went back there, when I started eating some of the food at restaurants, I noticed a difference right away. It made me a little more tired, didn't have the energy I had because mainly out here, cooking my own food, vegetables, some slight meat inside there, etc. But, coconut juice, whatever you're drinking out here, something different, a lot more fruit juices and thing. But back there, the food just seemed heavier, and it just had a different effect on my body, and I noticed it right away because there was an instant switch in my food, and I really noticed it. So if we move forward with all these synthetics, you have to think how it will change us, because you said transhumanist. And, this is kind of the goal, to blend the computer world or digital world into the human mind, a direct interface. And, Rod Steiger, I don't know, he's a commentator out there. I saw one of his episodes where he was talking about the internet itself as a new consciousness on our planet, like a superhuman God itself within the internet. It's its own consciousness, because it's so vast, and it's all of the humans are putting their own input into it. So it's growing larger every day, Because when you add to Facebook, when you add to a blog post, when you add to a newspaper, anything that's on the internet is feeding into this consciousness new entity that has evolved inside, literally, the internet. Speeding down the wires, electrical wires, and sounds a little strange and far-fetched, but when you start to think about, they now want to have a neural interface with that consciousness entity that exists within. It's a thinking thing. Do you think that all the cloud-based servers and all the internet information traffic and all that's up there into the web itself is not conscious now in itself? It is its consciousness being. And now they want to try to put your brain directly connected to it. So, what is at the end of this, and why do they want us to integrate with this new consciousness on the planet that's so much more vast than ourselves? I mean, AI in itself, when you think about it, so much more vast, so much more intelligent, so much faster, it's at a fourth dimensional level in itself already. Think about the internet. It is an interdimensional level of its own thing existing within. It's the blend of two worlds. It's a physical, because we have to build out the infrastructure. You need your computers. We need the wires, we need the cloud-based servers, but at the same time, it's an ethereal because it's a digital medium. So it exists with both. It's the interface between both worlds. It's an interface between dimensionality, if you will. And it's its own consciousness. Now, they want us to connect directly, plug our brains into that. Is that the end goal? And then at that point, okay, great. Every human's plugged into this new consciousness entity, and you're interfacing, and now you become part of it. At that point, then what are they going to do with all that new power? We were talking about transhumanism and a few other ideas as these crop losses pervade the planet and food becomes scarce. But what's the real agenda behind pushing the global warming, not allowing the citizens of the planet or persons to prepare when they know these changes are coming at the higher levels? I mean, if we know it's coming, imagine what these scientific bodies who have real instrumentation measuring the sun themselves can tell us. What about, and I do want to also talk about ancient history a little bit, the conquistadors, if you will, the church, when it explored the planet. Let's go back 500 years. Now, the stories that were given to us that they destroyed all the codices, they burned everything, they chipped everything. It was pagan as it was anti-God. They destroyed everything and burned everything. Well, I believe that that's not true. I really believe that they took everything back and boxed it up, and a lot of it's in libraries and museums and under the Vatican that you're unable to see. Now, couple that with, you control the best scientific institutions on the planet. You have all the scientific knowledge of prior cycles. Now, you know these cycles are coming. What is your play going to be to control the citizens as this thing is a slow train wreck unfurling? Christian, you talked about Facebook banning a fair few pages over the last week, and it started with 400, but I got you here. 1,600 pages in total so far have been banned, and they're conservative, right-leaning political pages. Now, obviously trying to interfere with the election and not allow you to get the correct information, but when is it going to come down to climate information falls into this same agenda where you're starting to affect society too much? And at what point, in your opinion, do you think pages like yours, mine, we're going to start to experience more censorship than we do now?
Well, it's hard to say exactly. Like I said in the first hour, we have for some time already seen those calls to make it happen. And we're already being, you can look time and time through history when this happens. People are dehumanized before they are, censored. And so you see that happening in headlines across the world right now when you see Hurricane Michael was made worse by climate deniers and by President Trump and anyone who doesn't believe in CO2, in fact, is responsible for all of those deaths down there. People are blaming for storm. I mean, we really have gone back hundreds of years and are entering the witch trials kind of territory here, where people are being blamed because of our belief systems for storms.
Yeah, and you have to think about the priests are up on the glaciers throwing holy water there to try to get the glaciers to recede. There always does have to be a scapegoat during these times, and you do have to wonder how much information is going to be allowed to move through. So right now it's political opponents and understood. And we have these other platforms, but they're not very large. You mentioned Gab.ai. They have less than 1 million on their user base. Maybe it's a little more now, 1.2 million or so. And when we go to places like Steam, where once you load an article up into the blockchain, it can't be erased, still their user base and active users right now is right around 1 million. So thinking that in comparison of something like YouTube that has 600 million channels on there, or 600 million registered users, they literally have 600 times more traffic coming through than even what's considered these alternative platforms. Minds, Minds.com, Minds.com, I'm up there, but again, their user base is small. BitChute, that's starting to try to compete with YouTube. Again, the user base comparatively to YouTube is relatively small. How about Real.video? They've just renamed themselves Bright Cove. Again, their user base, less than 1 million people. So even combined, think about this, even combined, all the alternatives out there to push your message are still only, a very small percentage of a fraction of the giants that control right now the messages out there with Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. If you add those three together and you put Minds, say Steemit, Gab, and Real.video, and you add all those together, it's literally like 1% of all the other traffic that's out on the planet. Now the media, with the new ICANN rules, they want to try to limit what websites can say. So this is the next step they're going to, is trying to limit actual websites, what you can say on your own personal blog. And if they don't agree with it, they are putting in some new rules on the link tax to try to silence you if you link to other news sources, or itself just downright turn off your site. This is what's in the new rules coming out of the EU, Section 13, Section 11, Section 15.
Yeah, they own the information space online. And that's why, I wanted to get to solutions here, because I think a lot of people, like I said, will talk about the censorship and then move on to the next thing, but we need to figure out the implications here. And if they own, as I'm saying, the online space, then where we turn has to be offline information activism. That's the key. And like you said, those other platforms just don't have the audience there, but at least we can use them, especially the blockchain. I don't trust anything that's centralized at all anymore, but at least the blockchain ones we can use as a place to put videos or documents or interviews, whatever, artifacts that then these offline hints can point at, and we can get people to directly get to them, because what they're doing is destroying discovery. We can push media across these trusted channels, but discovery, which is to say how people are able to wake up in the first place, it's going to have to be done offline. We're going to have to seed these people, like you said, asking for their data, and then if they don't have it, you've gotten around their defense mechanisms. You can actually then speak to them without just talking to the NPC. We have that lexicon now to use for the kind of conversation you would expect if you just said, there's no global warming, you just get attacked. So what is offline information activism? What do I mean when I say that? I mean, calling into radio shows, talk shows, printing brochures or flyers, and dropping USB sticks around places. You can have on hand documents like the Grand Solar Primer that James Marusek had created, which I think is a great one, and just lay these breadcrumbs. The people that you interact with might not get it right away. They almost certainly won't get it, and they may even attack you, but ultimately those seeds that you're planting may prove to have been on fertile ground, especially as these crop losses and extreme events continue. People are going to be looking for answers. So you can make a t-shirt with a hashtag on it or whatever. One guy on the Ice Age Farmer forums had an amazing petroglyph tattoo, which I thought was awesome, and he said it is quite the conversation starter. And when you get people to ask you about something, then you've got the floor. Then you can explain, oh, well, this means that, and so that really spoke to me. It's another way, like the way the conversation you described of asking for data and then giving them some suggestions. It's another way that you get past those defense mechanisms. The tattoo, or one thing I like to do, because it's also how I decompress, is play music. And so I'll go to open mic nights and play guitar and sing about the natural cycles of the sun, and I get a lot of strange looks, but that's great. And a symbol like that tattoo or a song can really be powerful. It can really reach through the conscious mind, past all the programming, and speak directly to the soul. And maybe ring a bell in there and help wake some up. But if not, that's all right too. I think, like I said, you plant the seeds and you move on. And this is really probably the most important thing I'm going to say tonight, is that we have to get out there and have these conversations.